So, this wasn't exactly how I was planning to make my grand return to video making or podcasting or whatever the hell you want to call what it is I do. But, well, something came up, and it was around the time I was writing the 30-second part of a long, rambling Twitter thread and realizing I was nowhere near to close to having said everything I wanted to say, that the thought occurred to me maybe Twitter isn't the best place to make this particular rant. I want to say discussion, but since it's just me talking at all of you, well, that may not exactly be fair. Regardless, the launching point for all this was a little article that was posted on a website called Comic Book Resources. If you're not familiar with them, I don't know if I envy you or not. God only knows they bring me equal parts enjoyment and frustration constantly. Like, they are one of the worst clickbait artists I've ever seen. But when you get past all that, and when you get past all the ass-kissing, they do at times actually put out good stuff, and there is enjoyable material, and yeah, anyways, relationship complicated. This particular article, which I saw the headline posted on Twitter, Joker movie may be uncomfortable, but necessary viewing for 2019, and yeah, my initial reaction only further bolstered when I actually read the whole entire article. My initial reaction was, oh god, it's already starting. Necessary. Seriously? Yeah, I'm sure Murderous White Guy Incel the movie is completely necessary for us all to see, as if we aren't living in that reality every goddamn day right now. Look, Joker could end up being the greatest movie of all time. It fucking isn't, of course, but sure, let's get hypothetical for a second. That would still be no reason to try and shame people who may be a little too close to the subject matter and don't want to have to go sit through a movie about it, thanks. And yes, perhaps I am projecting a bit, but I read the article and I don't really feel like I am. Also, personally, I don't feel any need to see a self-serious take on the unnecessary origin of perhaps the most vastly overused supervillain in all of comics as a tool to help me confront the truth of living in 2019 with asshole cis white guys. I'm a queer, non-binary Jew. I know the fucking score already. Maybe not as much as some, but I am at least familiar, thanks. Leaving myself aside, though, this hardly looks like the movie to tackle the topic properly. From the trailers and from the reviews, it already appears way too fucking sympathetic for my liking. No one needs to see a story that asks them to feel empathy for a gleeful, unrepentant murderer. Shows like Breaking Bad and movies like 1 Hour Photo are mostly good examples of how to keep human monsters equally compelling and pathetic to just the right balance when they are the lead, as it were, of the story. And that second part, the pathetic part, is vitally important because it's so easy to end up accidentally glorifying such figures instead. That's why the actual ending of Breaking Bad, as a quick aside, and specifically the fate of the main character, never quite sat right with me because it was a little too noble of an ending, but I can let it slide because it got so much else right in the lead up to that ending. And everything I see and read about Joker increasingly leads me to believe that the movie does not strike the proper balance. Sure, it clearly shows his pathetic side in the beginning, but that's not enough. If you don't carefully maintain that throughout, well, let's put it this way. Your movie stars a main character clearly positioned as someone society at large would code a loser. Someone everybody else either ignores or steps on without a second thought, because he can't or won't fight back and he just keeps taking it on the chin. And as a result of all this mistreatment, and perhaps because of other outside influences and factors far beyond his control, he begins to descend into what is colloquially known as madness. He embraces murder and other terrible actions as a way to fight back against the world that clearly is stacked against him. It's the only way. And suddenly, both the world of the movie and the movie itself in a larger meta sense no longer treats this guy as a pathetic schlub. No, now that he's embraced violence and acts of terror, he's someone to be taken seriously. He's no longer a loser. In fact, he's now a total badass. And this is the really important bit. No matter what else happens next, no matter this character's actual final fate, this new status quo remains intact. Maybe he dies. Maybe he fails. But he remains badass. He remains a scary and powerful figure. All traces of pathetic gone forever. When you lay it all out like that, do you start to see the problem with making a solo Joker movie? Especially one that is nominally standalone and is an origin set long before there's any Batman? In other words, one with no countering force to help undercut the supposed mystique of Joker? Look, it's not an accident that most modern Joker comic stories, even ones where he is nominally the lead, rarely actually have him as a point of view character. Because in modern comics, he's not really a character anymore. He's more a force of nature or a twisted philosophical outlook come to life. I mean, hell, that's even the approach that everybody's favorite Batman movie, the Batman movie most people will hold up as the greatest Batman movie of all time, possibly the greatest superhero movie of all time, the movie that is so beloved, The Dark Knight, that is the approach they took with the Joker. No, really, the Joker is not a character, really, or certainly not a human character. He's not really a human being. That's reinforced again and again throughout the movie. He does impossible things, and right up until the end, when it can't, the plot bends over backwards to give him whatever he wants, to let him do whatever he wants. And that's not a complaint. That is not a weakness. I am not saying this as a way of trying to drag The Dark Knight. I'm just stating a fact. That's the whole point behind the multiple, you want to know how I got these scars and all that stuff. He is a force in that movie, no question. He has a huge impact, but he's also a liar. Almost nothing he says is actually truthful, and what he's actually doing and why is so suspect constantly, you can never really be sure of his motivations, of his desires, of his wants. It's perhaps a little much to say he's not a character at all. But it's not that far from the truth either. And at the very least, The Dark Knight is not interested in who the Joker is, or at least who he was, and more what the Joker is and what is going to be his impact on all the actual characters around him. And when you do it like that, you can end up with really potent, engaging, yet terrifying results. You can make a villain who is very compelling, but somebody the audience isn't gonna sympathize with, isn't gonna empathize with. Maybe on some level you go, okay, I guess he's kind of badass, but he's so removed from what we would see as an actual person that you don't need to worry that people are gonna hopefully try and be him. Of course, in reality, people will always glom onto the worst role models, as it were. If they're inclined towards that, in some ways there's no stopping it, but you certainly don't need to help it along either. And that's my point. If you're going to present the Joker in that light, if you're going to try and present him that way, there are some key things you need to do, not least of which is presenting counterpoints to him, presenting other characters who stand opposed against him, and ultimately are right. Because while the Joker, he accomplishes some of what he wants, at the end, the ordinary people of Gotham don't give him what he wants. The worst people in Gotham show their best side in a moment that is completely counter to what he does. And yes, he corrupts arguably the best, though really, obviously part of the point of The Dark Knight is that Harvey Dent is not really the best, that he is a paper tiger, as it were, that he is a false knight, that everybody is putting their hopes on the wrong person. But okay, we're not here to talk about The Dark Knight. I could do that any day of the week, anytime you want, in depth. But regardless, the point is, The Dark Knight does not present the Joker as the protagonist. It does not really take his point of view, and it does not leave any room for the idea that he is right or that you should see him as a role model. If anybody tries to take that from the way the character is presented in The Dark Knight, then that is just them deliberately ignoring the text and subtext of the movie and reading whatever the hell they want into it. And at that point, there's only so much an artist can do. I remain unconvinced, however, that Joker, the 2019 standalone movie, is going to end up doing that. Because, I mean, do you really think the movie's going to end with him dying? And do you really think ending with him dying, even if that was the way it ended, would be enough? Take one of the most famous, popular, beloved, correctly or not, Batman Joker stories of all time. Yes, I am of course talking about The Killing Joke. It's a story I don't have a great opinion of anymore. I am not alone in that. But okay, leave that aside. Whatever else you could say about that story, and there's a lot of bad things you could say about The Killing Joke. One of the key points of it, one of the very key points, one of the central points of The Killing Joke is that the Joker is wrong. That this whole idea, this whole philosophy that he's living behind, that all it takes is one really bad day for everybody else to be like him. That the whole world is secretly like him, they just don't have the guts to admit it. That everybody is secretly awful, and all it takes is the right circumstances to make them behave in that way, is wrong. That he is wrong. It's told, yes, from Commissioner Gordon not giving in to his really obvious torture and all that, but it's also in the fact that, and this is why I don't agree with that one reading that the story ends with Batman killing the Joker, that Batman doesn't give in to it. That Batman doesn't secretly believe that way. That Batman rejects the Joker's idea. That Batman is a living example that the Joker is wrong. That Batman is somebody who had one of those really bad days. And maybe he fucked up his own life. But he's tried to take that and turn it into something good, something positive in the way he can best. To quote another property, look at the classic episode of Doctor Who, the 50th anniversary, The Day of the Doctor, where the War Doctor turns to a character and goes, what has their pain, what has their regret done? How many lives has it saved? What good has come out of it? And then later on he says, make it worthwhile. That yes, it's still horrible and terrible and tragic, but at least you don't have to add to that tragedy through your own actions anymore. That you can at least try to do something to counter that. And that's what the best, in my opinion, superhero stories and the best Joker stories and the best Batman stories ultimately do. They aren't ultimately saying the Joker is right. They don't believe the Joker is right because then there'd be no point. The best Batman stories reject that. They reject the idea that Batman should kill because that isn't correct. And it's not fair of us to put that on him if we don't have the will, as it were, to do that ourselves. As SF Debris has said a number of times when he's covered superheroes very effectively. And most recently in his take on Superman versus the Elite, which you should definitely go search out. You should search out everything SF Debris does. He's one of my favorite people on the internet in terms of producing content. Regardless, this is my concern with the Joker. Knowing the setup, reading the reviews, some of which get fairly spoilerific, and just understanding the basic concepts and seeing the trailers, I'm fairly convinced that, yes, the Joker will start out as this pathetic figure, but then he will become the Joker, and all of that will drop away. And I'm not convinced the movie is going to properly keep it going. Like I said, Breaking Bad. Like, Breaking Bad does a very good job of showing, no, our lead character is not really badass. He's not somehow better now that he's given in to all his worst impulses. And that the ultimate consequences are he goes off and he lives this really sad, empty, far more pathetic life than he had before he becomes, the guy who knocks or whatever. And that's why I kind of don't love that ending. And 1 Hour Photo, again, a movie that's definitely got some flaws, but it never puts Robin Williams' character as somebody who's this awesome Hannibal Lecter type. And indeed, the creator of Hannibal Lecter, the writer, the author who created the books, often struggled himself with the fact that people failed to miss the point that, no, you shouldn't be seeing Hannibal as the hero. He's not the hero. He's not somebody to look to. He's not somebody to admire. He's not somebody badass. He's not somebody awesome. He clearly struggled with that. And that was actually something that I thought that, the Hannibal TV series did a very good job of addressing. The point is, there are ways to have these, surface level compelling characters who are compelling because of how evil they are, but to still present it in a way that makes it clear, no, you shouldn't look up to them. No, they haven't become less pathetic. They've just become a different kind of awful and pathetic. Yes, they are terrifying in a way, but that is not what we should aspire to. That we should be better, that we can and should be more. And if you don't subscribe to that philosophy, if you do just want to embrace the nihilism of it all, I don't got nothing to say to you. You can just go the fuck away. I have no room for that. I have no room for that in my life. As awful as things are these days, I refuse to embrace the idea that nihilism of all things, is correct. And that's what leads to so many of these awful things and these shootings. It's the way we, intentionally or not, we glorify, we say the name of the monster instead of the victim, and we put them up on this pedestal, and we create this false narrative, and it's something we all do, although, yeah, the media definitely bears a lot of guilt. It's something we can all be part of if we're not careful, is perhaps the better way to put it. And that's especially why in 2019, I really, really, really don't feel the Joker movie is necessary at all. It isn't. It isn't necessary. It's the exact opposite of necessary. A movie not only where he's the lead, where he's the point of view, where he's the star, and there isn't the normal counterbalance for him to serve as a counterweight. Honestly, it strikes me as irresponsible filmmaking at best. And yes, there is a morality to storytelling. And no, I'm not saying that Joker movie by itself is going to create these things, that it's more complicated than that, sure, and there's more going on, and blah, 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 blah. It's not that this thing by itself in a vacuum is solely responsible. It's that responsible filmmaking understands that you don't make movies, or you don't make video games, or you don't make books, or you don't make anything. You don't make art in a vacuum. That yes, you are free to make the art you want, but you also then need to accept the consequences of it. And no, video games don't lead to shootings, but that doesn't mean that that the exact opposite, that, well, there's no responsibility at all to consider the impact of violent video games can have. That doesn't mean, yeah, that's true either. There is this thing called middle ground. There is this thing called nuance. So, yes, long rant short, and now do you see why I didn't end up publishing this as a Twitter thread? You're welcome. I got real concerns about the Joker movie, and I'm not convinced these concerns will be addressed. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the end of the Joker movie will do... I remember there's one of my favorite stories. It's a now mostly forgotten miniseries, I think from the 90s. It was right after, or after the time of Crisis, back when Batman and Superman were being kept very separate. And it was called World's Finest. And it was a deliberate kind of semi-throwback, sort of set in the then modern continuity of Batman and Superman teaming up, and kind of showing why that's fun. And it also has Joker, Luthor teaming up in their more modern incarnations. And it ends very deliberately with this image of basically Batman de-pantsing Joker and sending him running off into the night, completely humiliated. And that's how you ultimately should deal with the Joker. That's how all Joker stories, in my opinion, ultimately, in some way or another, need to end, with him disproven. Because if you are taking the perspective that, no, he's right, even unintentionally, well, in my opinion, you've made a pretty big mistake as a storyteller, and I think you should face the consequences for that. And I don't believe that grim and gritty is necessarily better, and I don't believe a whole host of things. I honestly don't know if I'm going to end up seeing Joker or not. At the moment, I don't particularly want to, but whether or not I may end up feeling compelled to for a whole host of reasons, well, regardless, I'm very concerned about the Joker movie, and no matter how good or bad it ends up being, I will never accept the idea that it was necessary. Thank you for putting up with this. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. As always, my name is Sean Cronenfeld, and for Unrepentant Geeking, I want to wish you long days and pleasant dark nights. Till next time.